hosts for today.
Thanks. Just talk about the logistics a bit. This is not going to be a breakout session in which Greg and I are going to tell you how great the cloud is and get you all excited and want to go to the latest and greatest Microsoft Cloud. This is actually going to be just a discussion. And the role of myself and Greg is basically just to be literally passing the mic and kind of encouraging you to talk and share experience and share your concerns and just be part of that conversation. And as you can see, this is being recorded, so if you don't want to become famous and be the star of the internet and TV, now is the time to escape. With that, I think we can just get started. And we also have, for 5 most active participants, we have a wonderful Microsoft Cloud branded gifts and giveaways. Just to kick things off, a little bit about myself. My name is Dmitry Sotnikov. I work for Quest Software. It's a software vendor. And my personal interest in the cloud is that I'm just involved in some of our internal cloud projects, some of our own use of Windows Azure for our SaaS services, some of our tools for Office 365, and so on. So there is kind of personal involvement and personal experience. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hopefully this is working okay. I'm not on one of the other mics. So my name is Greg Lambert. I work for a company called ChangeBASE, and we automate the process for getting your applications assessed and remediated on the way to virtualization platforms and soon the cloud. So our whole idea is we want to take your applications in bulk, convert them, automate them, assess them, and get them ready for the cloud environment, whatever that environment might be.
Cool. Just to kind of kick things off, who here has actually some experience with cloud in a kind of broader meaning? Either some kind of external infrastructure as a service, like Amazon or Azure, or maybe some kind of SaaS deployments, like Salesforce.com, Office 365, and so on. Okay. So I think it would be good if we get started with just like you sharing a bit about what you guys are doing. Does it work for you? Does it not work for you? And then kind of we'll go from there.
I'll just pass the mic over there for you.
Good afternoon. My name is Malcolm Freeney, and I'm a project manager with the House of Representatives. And you have each member office is like their own corporation. So we provide a private cloud functionality to our members in terms of hosted virtualization solutions, infrastructure, and what have you. We don't. So that's been working real well for us. Now, what's not working well because of the nature of the privacy and the nature of how our representatives are is we haven't done a whole lot of public external cloud solutions because the members are sensitive about their data. So they're like, their biggest thing is we don't want our data residing in a public cloud. So that's kind of some sort of the public-private successes, failures that we're working with. We're trying, it's evolving, but everything within Congress is a real slow evolution. So that's some of the experiences.
Right. So do you expect to go more to the public cloud at some stage in the future?
In the future, some things will go in the because there's just no choice, because with the budget constraints and with just the time to enact everything, eventually we're going to have some cloud functionality. It's not going to be everything because just the nature of the data and everything, and the House is real big on control. So you're not going to see a wholesale like the Department of Treasury with their recovery.gov and their initiatives. We won't go there, but there'll be some one-offs and some functionality, and you'll have some member offices that do stuff on their own in the cloud. That'll definitely happen, and that is happening.
Interesting. So do you see your organization kind of being the broker here and helping your internal customers evaluate whether to go with a public or private, help them evaluate the choice somehow?
We are. We provide that, and the members can choose whether to take our advice in that particular conversation, or some members and their staffs are savvy enough to kind of make those decisions on their own. But we do, as part of our offerings, we do that.
Right.
Currently.
Right.
So.
What's your experience? I think you were.
We looked at changing some of our environments. Since we had 3 different environments from our dev to our production, we decided to take one of our test environments, move it onto a cloud to see if it could be worked. And in that process, we made a disaster recovery for us, because our disaster recovery was literally 5 miles down the road from where we were at. So we really questioned, is that really a good choice? So we just extended out our network to use Amazon's cloud and started just including that into our network.
And how did the Amazon cloud failure affect you guys?
Didn't. We weren't distributed.
Right, okay.
So we were only at one call. Since this is still was all in test for us, it was still at one location. We're deciding if we do distribute, we're going to distribute it and make it just 2 different environments. So we're just going to move our other environment over, make it disaster recovery at 2 different other centers. That's how we're going to do it.
Fantastic. That's good to hear.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, right? Because I think we are in some sort of cloud disillusionment phase, right?
The dark days of the stormy cloud scenario.
Well, I mean,
that's it.
people. I think we as a market start to figure out that everything can fail, right? And the cloud can fail as well. I mean, the good thing is that someone else is going to be hopefully working on fixing that, right? But it might fail, so contingency planning needs to be done, regardless of whether you're using something internally or externally.
And I think the key point there is everything can fail. So Foursquare went down, but you didn't. So that's interesting, and because you distributed, right? So maybe what we're really talking about with the cloud scenario now is cloud as part of your data center and your services fabric, if that makes sense. Interesting.
Did anyone in the audience had a kind of bad experience with the cloud, of like trying that and finding that it doesn't work, it doesn't fit, it's not a good idea?
The only thing that I can say is that some products are not.
Might just pass the microphone to you there.
No, the only thing I wanted to point out is that some products are not ready for the cloud yet. For example, SharePoint 2010, that was my main interest. I'm a SharePoint 2010 administrator. Right. And I was trying to see if I can save some costs, but unfortunately it's not ready yet. So I cannot tell you if it's effective or not, because I can't try it right now. Hopefully it will be effective and I can save some costs.
Right. So.
Well, we're using Performance Point for our dashboard. We have a dashboard for the county, and I was told that Performance Point is not in the cloud yet. So I believe fast search is another feature that is not in the cloud yet. Exactly. And because we have an enterprise presence, this is only for the intranet, but still it's enterprise, and we have 62 departments where, searching across multiple site collections, so we definitely need that. That was the main reason why I'm a little bit disappointed, but.
Right, so you're basically waiting for Microsoft's Office 365 to get there,
exactly.
to give you the features that you need.
Yes, absolutely. But other than that, I think it's a great idea.
Do you have any kind of security concerns, privacy concerns?
I don't personally, but I'm sure our groups, yes. But I have no saying in that. So I don't really foresee any problems from my side. But because, this is a government agency and, there's some concerns as far as, citizens' information and, probably. But I do not see anything personally.
What you have?
I work for a trading company, and we're trying to figure out how we can use the cloud. We're a small proprietary prop shop, futures and options, and our latency and processing time is, sub-second. We need it very low. We also have a lot of security and compliance issues. So we're very concerned about putting anything on the cloud, let alone having a company then sign that they are responsible if there's a break-in, right, on anything that they host for us, or things that we host. Network connectivity is an issue,
so
right?
For you, it's co-location, and you're getting your latency issues, right?
Correct. So I'm trying to figure out what pieces. Obviously, Exchange is a no-brainer. Get rid of that.
Fine,
right?
Yeah.
Goodbye. Not, my administrator is worried about it, but he's still going to have to administer it, so you just don't have the hardware locally. What else are other companies doing to start, I'm hoping that this session would be about typical applications that other people, little bits and pieces just to get out there,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Maybe we could just open up to everybody there. I think just echoing some of the questions there, I'm thinking, so you're going to ask the question, so what processes, what part of my business so that I can get out into the cloud? Is that the question? Okay, maybe if you're, Dmitry, you're okay with that forward? Any thoughts on that one there? What do you think we can get out of our environment and into the cloud? I lose my microphone really quick.
Deep storage, just put it in your archives that you already have for tape drives elsewhere instead of having a massive archive of tapes. Just put the tape drives that put all the information there and put whatever encryption you want on it. At that point, it's encrypted, it was cracked. At least you can say, hey, system was hacked, but we had it encrypted as good as anywhere else.
Well, I mean, we're currently using archival companies, Iron Mountain for our tapes, Xantaz, God forbid, for our email archiving, but we're looking at other tools. So in that sense, we're somewhat, but I'm looking for ways that we can internally get rid of some of our services locally and present them globally.
Unfortunately, SharePoint's not there yet, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure, do you have like any off-site storage for like your file? I mean, not saying really sensitive data, but some less sensitive data?
Everyone, we're going to have you speak directly into the microphones because we're not picking up the audio.
The problem is low latency. We need sub millisecond,
But I'm saying,
access to our data, so it's really difficult,
let's say the building burns down. What contingency do you have for that?
Well, we have co-locations, that's
That's
about
what
it, right?
That's what more, at least for my site, found, since we had everything on one location, the primary data center at the one location, this gave us an ability to actually put it to where we could throw up another site real quick, have our full e-commerce site going, which is pretty much our #1 generator of revenue for us. And that's why we did it that way.
So I work for a company that does, well, we're in the web space, so we've got to push out our content as close to the edge as possible. So, it's more of the traditional cloud mentality before it was called the cloud, right? We do edge content caching with CDNs. Maybe it doesn't apply to you as much, but for us, we need low latency access to our customers. They're loading images. We've got a component to our website where you can upload an image. We don't want to pay to store everybody's user-generated content, right? So we store it in the cloud on our content distribution network and then push that out to the edge. So that's how we kind of leverage the cloud to help us.
It's interesting about the cloud because I was asked a question a little while ago, what is the cloud? Or, it's a very nebulous term right now. It can mean anything on the internet you access. It could mean you have remote processing, you have core processing. And one of the things I'm thinking about what you're doing there in the Chicago Trading Company is you probably have latency issues, but you got processing issues as well. And I'm thinking maybe one of the things that might be interesting as a cloud is all about scalability, right? So I want more of this. I just ask for more, and it just happens, right? More SQL servers, more space, more data. That's my sort of view of the cloud right now, which means you could have a private cloud, a community cloud, or the shared cloud, the internet cloud. So maybe what you need is the private cloud, one of those appliances from Microsoft maybe. And that will get you have scalability, and they can just wheel something in there into where you need it in your shared or co-located environment, and then it can expand as required.
From a dev and QA perspective, today or this week, seeing provisioning in that sense, I can see that being very handy. We get calls all the time, destroy this VM, give us another one. We're tired of it, and I just want somebody to be able to do that themselves. Is that like the beginning steps to getting there? In that sense, in a private cloud?
I actually don't know because I'm seeing some customers, especially in the test scenarios. I know some companies who are just trying to use the public cloud for their tests, just because their testing has spikes. They don't want to be using internal cloud for that at all, right? So they kind of skip that phase because they, I guess, didn't have the latency concerns and performance concerns, security concerns, whatever. For them, being able to spin up multiple machines in the cloud, do the test, shut them down, kind of made it worth it, right? I don't think I think they were complaining that some of the automation was not there yet. Like they couldn't really control that spinning up, shutting down, and stuff. But they were happy with the price points, I guess.
Another issue, real quick, if I can finish. Another issue that we have, if anybody's familiar with it, current Intel chipsets cannot process our calculations fast enough to get the information back to the traders. So, and we're constantly cycling out our hardware. I mean, we're overclocking. We're doing everything we can, right? And literally taping chips on the side of the computer so when they burn up, we throw another one in and just keep going. So how does that happen in a cloud when you're working from services from somebody else? How fast do they refresh their hardware? Are there companies out there that consider financial services?
It's a good question. Actually, I got a couple scenarios for you that might reflect that. You had a mic there. Is there a question? I'm just wondering if we'll come back to that.
I work for SAS in Cary, North Carolina. Work for client systems, a little unique situation here. We're looking to go into the cloud, but for collaborative purposes. From the client system standpoint, we've seen tons of new devices come out. iPad, all this different slate devices, phones.
It's all access points, absolutely, yeah.
And we started distributing those as consumption devices, but now people want to do everything with them.
Yep.
And we'd like to give them a laptop so they can do everything, but they don't. So the problem is trying to get your documents, your information from anywhere, right, at any time, home, traveling, on the corporate network, et cetera. And we're thinking about some cloud, Office 365, et cetera. We have a very elaborate SharePoint deployment internally, Office 2010 already. We're thinking about going to the cloud. I don't know if anybody else is doing that for that type of reason, for the document, collaboration, access.
Any comments? Anyone else thinking that cloud kind of for collaboration specifically cloud makes sense because your end users are not in the internet anyway, right?
I think what you're going to see, I'll just jump in there with some thoughts there. Working across the number of clients that we work with, we're seeing an explosion of what I call access points or consumption points. And you're across different platforms, different technologies, different locations, different reasons for using things. And what we're seeing as well is each person might have a laptop, iPhone, iPad, desktop, and a number of remote or virtual connections back in, right? So you're seeing this myriad collection of connections. And it's exactly the scenario you're seeing. And so that's when the cloud becomes interesting, right? Because as long as you've got an internet connection and some simple interface, you can have that collaborative aspects. So I'm seeing that as well. I'm just wondering if everyone's seen, I think what you're going to talk about is the hybrid approach of this multi-point. Is that what you're thinking?
We're thinking more hybrid, maybe a test group with marketing. Pass the mic there, sorry. Right now we're just thinking about, trying to plan ahead, maybe some type of test group with our marketing or, the folks that are traveling, our sales force maybe, to see how they like it, and then as people request it, start switching them over into that. We have a very good EA agreement now, so this would be on top of that, and then there would be a transition to a cloud agreement. That's what we're thinking about. I don't know, does that sound right or right on track?
Well, it's probably a bit of reality there. You're probably just hitting a little bit first before anybody else. Actually, if I could just for a second, I'm just going back to your point. There's a couple of things. You were talking about hardware and provisioning, right? And say if I'm going to use the Amazon, I'm going to use Microsoft, I'm going to use whatever everybody's cloud, how can I get hardcore performance? So you're talking HPC, you're talking about getting a certain number of calcs per second, right? And it's interesting. I know a number of large financial institutions, very similar to yourself, have come up and said, the cloud isn't fast enough for me. And remember what we were talking about before is this edge processing versus central processing for the cloud. It's about accessibility, it's about scalability. That's the cloud sort of thing right now. The private cloud challenge has come back, and they actually talked about provisioning. So there's a number of tools now called orchestration, which is effectively the tools required from a cloud perspective of spinning up new machines. That's gone. We need 10 more of these. And so there's some tools out there we can talk about afterwards that are actually doing that now today. So a lot of banks are considering the cloud perspective, but it's not doing enough fast enough for them right now. And that's probably the scenario you're in right now.
Yeah. And we also seen vendors like Microsoft and Amazon starting to offer that kind of higher tier of infrastructure as a service for high performance. So yeah, I think that it looks like the vendors definitely see that as a lucrative market for the cloud.
The problem is the latency.
Yeah.
Even if I had a 7 gigahertz chip in a machine in the cloud, network connectivity, it's going to take too long to get it to me.
I think Microsoft has to buy some space and LSE and the FTSE 500 and all the trading houses. That's for them. They need to spend the $10,000 per rack and get that co-location space for those financial houses, just like yourselves. So if Microsoft can afford $10,000, I think it'd be all right.
I work for a software services company, and so basically we're the cloud for our customers. But we're getting to the point now that we're putting in servers so fast that we're looking to go to a company like iLand and basically virtualize all our servers and move them up there. And that way we're buying, processing power and memory power and space rather than keep buying servers and get out of the hardware business totally. And just wondering if anybody else was thinking about moving in that direction.
So you're becoming a kind of virtual cloud vendor and in effect kind of cloud broker, infrastructure broker rather than actually hosting and running it physically.
Well, my long-term goal would be to get our application that we could just move it totally to the cloud, not even have virtual machines anymore. That would be my fantasy cloud someday out there.
Just out of curiosity, just on that, you say get your application run on a cloud. It's a Windows application right now, and you're spinning up virtual machines for capacity. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a IIS front end with a SQL back end. Basically, we store the data and push out reports for our customers. So it's on all Windows, and we're going to be spitting out virtual Windows machines instead of buying servers and going down that route.
Okay, thanks.
Can you pass the mic?
This is probably a simple question, but from our standpoint and our organization, does it make sense to put everything in the cloud? And I guess what I mean by that is we're getting a big push from our executives that we need to put as many things as possible in the cloud. So we're putting our CRM in the cloud. We're putting our professional service in the cloud. Now we're pushing to get Exchange in the cloud, SharePoint in the cloud. At what point... Yeah.
Where do you stop?
At what point do you stop? Like,
that's right.
Is
So
there
candidate?
something that you say, okay, CEO or CIO, this does not go in the cloud, or is that not?
Nope.
I have a similar question to that. People want to go to the cloud. So my question to my managers is, are you wanting to go to the cloud because it's cool? Or do you have a specific requirement that we can fulfill by changing over to cloud services? And I hope they're not watching.
I won't say anything.
We're going to have meetings when I get back. Next 2 weeks, we're going to start cloud discussions, and I'm going to ask that question. I'm like, well, what requirement are you looking for? Do you want to reduce IT staff? Do you want to reduce hardware costs? Do you want accessibility? And that's what I want to hear from them, so then we can say, okay, this is the direction we need to go as an IT department.
And I guess that's the frustration that I'm having as well as my staff is we're being told, and it's almost like we're being shoved, cloud, 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 put this in the cloud, put that in the cloud. But it's like, if it's here and if it's working, does it make sense to put it in the cloud, or it's those comeback questions that we're not sure of how to address that?
Right. I guess one of the things we'll be doing, you'll see over the next little while, is like a ROI calculator for clouding your apps or clouding your infrastructure. I've not seen any good examples of that yet. So, I mean, it's the first company that does it, hint of any vendors out there going, you should build a cloud calculator, right? So you should be thinking things like, so what would be the return on this, right? So what were the critical things for getting things to cloud? Would be access, would be scalability, right? I mean, you're talking, your boss is asking you to say, hey, get this into the cloud. You should be saying why it's working now. We've got a cost of change, cost of training, cost of installation, configuration, update. We may have to change your deployment and maintenance procedures, right? So let's put all those in there as well. And when you take a look at that and go, okay, if they're lower, that's great, but we should ask the questions before you migrate to the cloud. And I think there's a number of things that people aren't asking right now. Exchange, as you said before, no-brainer, right? It works great. It's been done. We've all experienced some variety of the good and bad of it, right? But if you've got some sort of internal process or application working well in your environment, I think there has to be a compelling business case. I just wonder if anybody has any ideas for them would be a critical factor something that, what's the most important thing that's going to get that app out of their environment? Would it be cost, or would it be maintenance, or people? I'm thinking people probably is a hint there. Any thoughts? Oh.
So this may not go directly to your point. Cost is certainly a factor, and performance obviously is as well. But we have a lot of sensitive data. So for us, I just can't move it to the cloud until the vendors start getting certifications. I know Amazon recently passed their PCI DSS, and that's great. I can use that as some leverage with my management to say, hey, maybe we can move some of our data here. But we also have other regulatory concerns, SOX. So we have to find a vendor that supports as many of those large standards as possible. Otherwise, I really can't move much of my data to the cloud to begin with.
So
Right.
security and standards and compliance with your regulatory
Right. That goes back to security and compliance. They're really not the same thing. Compliance, I got to check the box no matter what. Even if it's secure, I still have to check the box and give it to an auditor. So
Right, but if I hear what you're saying that at some point when the cloud vendors get certified, it's kind of cloud becomes a better option for you because you're kind of outsourcing that compliance need, right? You don't.
Right.
They can prove to the auditors.
Absolutely. I don't want to have to have my
compliant.
auditor in
You
and
don't have
convince
to.
him that the cloud is a viable option for us. So I'd much rather have them say, look, we've gone through our certification, and here's the paper to prove it. So.
I have a question. In your talks with the cloud vendors, have they been receptive to collaborating on a security model that would work for you guys for your certification and compliance objectives? The reason why I asked was I went to a Microsoft presentation that Treasury gave. And when they moved all their website infrastructure onto SharePoint and into the cloud, they had the same concerns. And working together with Amazon, they were able to create a model that worked for them. Obviously, that's Treasury, so Amazon obviously has a better interest, but that's just a suggestion that you may have, in your interview process. The cloud vendors, state your requirements and state that, there needs to be some form of a collaboration to make that work. I don't know if that'll, convince your senior management, but it's an option.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have had some of those discussions. We really aren't as concerned with the security aspect of it.
Right.
But like I said, it's one of those things where I have to have the compliance no matter what.
Right.
So if they don't have it, then I can't put any data on it. But once they get to that point, and I know they are actively working on it. Amazon's already kind of completed the first step that kind of covers the broadest portion of their customer base, I would think. I think they'll get there, and I think it's going to be a good alternative for us in the future.
Okay.
You had a comment?
Just extending the security conversation. I'm just referring to a recent study that was done by a company that basically did a study on some of the cloud providers and looked at security as being one of their primary objectives to their customers, and it looks like it was way down at the bottom. Security basically was not a top priority. A lot of the
for the vendors or for the customers?
For the actual vendors.
Mm-hmm.
The customers, they basically think we'll throw all our data over the wall and everything will be good to go. They just don't realize that security. If security is not a top priority, and your data's out there, where are we going to be heading in the cloud?
That's really interesting. I was just thinking maybe there's an assumption that the security is there.
I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, the customer just throws their data over the wall and thinks everything will be secure. The study that was done here, and I'm just referencing it on, it was actually sent out on one of the TechNet blogs. It's actually pretty astounding. And being a service provider myself, working for a service provider company that offers infrastructure services to our customers, our bread and butter has been basically selling on-prem infrastructure services, Exchange, SharePoint, and so on and so forth. And now we're sort of coming to a point in time where the customers are asking us about the cloud. And, for us, knowing that security is not a top priority, especially for public clouds, it's difficult for us to actually tell the customer that a cloud is a good option, right? So I'm just wondering, as far as offering security as a true service, where are we heading now that the push for the cloud is at such a high speed?
Well, it's kind of to go on with his. So how do you know that it's secure? I mean, you go to the public. I mean, what is going to be that proof that you say, oh, I know my data is secure. I know that nobody's getting into our stuff, because we have government contracts. We have patents pending. There's some data we can't, I would be scared to put out there because we can't have anybody to get to it. So how do you know that it's secure?
I would say, as an IT practitioner, you're always ultimately responsible for the security of your data. You can never count on a vendor or a third party to be responsible, because if there is a security breach, it's going to come back to you. They're not, they may sue the vendor, and you probably have arbitration agreements with them, but at the same time, your job as an IT practitioner is to ensure that the data is secure. So it doesn't mean you just pump your data into the cloud. You got to encrypt on the wire, data at rest. You've still got to follow the same security principles that you would otherwise, and then you have to do your due diligence with your vendors to make sure that they're following similar security policies and compliance and pursuing those avenues as well. So it's definitely, to his point, not something you can just say, I don't no longer have to worry about security because I have a cloud vendor working on it. So.
I think just last week there was the whole thing about Dropbox, which is a very popular consumer storage, and originally they had in all their statements saying that all data is encrypted, but then someone asked them, how come it's encrypted, but you guys are doing delta synchronization of the file changes and data deduplication, like storing a single file just once and only bringing changes? How can that be encrypted if you're doing that? And then they changed all their language on their pages, saying that it is encrypted, but certain employees and technology has access to unencrypted data and so on and so forth. So yeah, you have to do the research. On the other hand, I know, again, from kind of personal experience, because we are doing some software as a service for IT administrators, and some of the data is fairly sensitive. Like, for example, we are doing Active Directory backup in the cloud, right? So that is sensitive data, right? Your Active Directory backup has your hash keys of user passwords, right? Or event log management in the cloud. Again, your event logs can have sensitive data. So I know that some of our customers, like banks, for example, they do pretty intensive review of our procedures before they sign up, right? But they come to us and they ask us to provide them with all the information about the architecture and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't think you can take it for granted.
I got a few more questions, that's all right? I think it's really interesting about the point, though, about the Dropbox, because I use Dropbox, and I think it's fantastic and it's great. But like I say, you just assume it's secure, right? And then we find out actually who is reading your stuff. Jim. Sure. I was actually thinking about the route to the cloud. We've got Amazon, we've got some Microsoft. I'm wondering what kind of journey we're going through right now. I'm just thinking, so what kind of application compatibility, what kind of, we talked about security, what kind of other issues we're experiencing? Are you guys seeing, I have to convert my apps to this format, I have to do these changes to get it to work? What kind of work is required to get to the cloud? That's one of.
I wanted to add to the Dropbox point.
Oh, you jump in.
I love it, but when I started using it, I put any data that I felt like I could lose. Like, I used it as a student because I'm finishing my MBA. I didn't care if they looked at it, because people were looking at that data anyway. Their presentations, all that stuff is
Facebook.
All that stuff was cited, certified, or anything else. I wasn't putting anything, my bills or anything like that. I didn't necessarily trust Dropbox to put my bills and all that, even though by doing online banking, there's a certain amount of control that I get that, hey, if someone wanted to track me, they could track me through my electronic transactions anyway, but that's not something I was using for Dropbox.
Cool, thanks. Oh, go ahead.
Are we just creating something to do? Are we bored? You know, I mean, are we trying to keep IT going as leaders, right? You know, we see reduction, we see offshoring, we see all this kind of stuff going on. Yeah, right. So are we just trying to create something to do? You know, besides scalability, right, maybe provisioning, the security aspect is crucial. Speed is crucial for us. I don't see a whole lot of value in it for some organizations.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to that very point. I see a room. Well, I'm from a small organization. There's only 250 users, so I'm sure anyone here could probably tell me I don't really need a cloud. But the demand doesn't seem from us. Cloud. The demand seems from cloud providers, customers. You know, it's like in IT, change is the only constant. You know, we should be thinking. We're forward thinking at all times. And I hate to sound like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But this didn't even occur to me. You know, I never thought that, man, dealing with all this hardware, this is a pain in the ass. If only I could outsource it. I mean, if we're going to outsource that, I mean, I could think of a lot more things I would rather outsource than hardware. I mean, take care of my end users. You know, I'm dealing with servers. Deal with these pains in my ass. You know, hardware is not my biggest, and I'm not even, trying to be cute about it. I'm just thinking, where's the demand coming from? Is it coming from us, or is it coming? Are they demanding it from, like, people who are selling it? They're demanding our demand. Does that make any sense? I'm just, yeah, it would never even have occurred to me that we need this.
You want to add to that?
This is kind of going back to the first question. One thing that we've noticed, and which is an internal issue that some companies, and our company have, real life, is not having solid processes. Perfect example, we have a CRM, very, very customized to our company. When you go to the cloud, using Salesforce.com, which is, you can customize it, but it's going to cost you. So if you don't have a lot of standard processes in place, and you're a company that kind of do a lot of one-offs, and when you try to go to the cloud, we wind up spending a lot of money trying to customize something that's standard for us. And so in that regard, the cloud was a little bit expensive, almost $1 million. But in that sense, the lesson from that was if you don't have solid processes on site, when you try to move to that same solution in the cloud, you can run into some big problems there. And we're seeing the same thing with our professional services. But this time, we're taking a step back and fixing the processes before we move to the cloud. So. Right.
So the more standard you become, the more standard your processes are, the more standard the application is, like email, whatever.
That's what we're seeing.
The bigger the ROI would be for just
the more standard you are, the easier it is. The more customized, the more one-offs you are, the harder it is to keep that same functionality that you had and your users are used to on site, to have that same functionality and accessibility in the cloud.
Which kind of makes sense, because if the promise of the cloud is the economy of scale, then the more standard you are, the bigger the chance that there will be that scale and the economy of scale, right? For one of things, there's no scale.
Yes, and that's the one advice I can give: be standard.
You want to add to that?
I want to address you in the corner, about hardware. Well, one thing that we have done, the first thing that we did in the cloud was with Exchange. We had about 13 anti-spam servers just for anti-spam. So we've offloaded all of that with Microsoft Forefront, and it filters out about 3.5 million emails a day so that we don't have to virus check, all that. So that really economically, benefited us from not having to continually add more and more and more and more anti-spam servers. So it reduced hardware costs. a lot. So, you know, that's one advantage. I hear you about the other stuff, but that's just one example.
But would you attribute that to your being a large organization? Because like I said, we're only 250 people. We don't have anything nearly at that scale. So, I mean, does that make sense? Would you attribute that to your size?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, for a small organization, if I was the IT person, I'd offload everything into the cloud. I wouldn't have to deal. All I'd have to do was configure and be an architect instead of an administrator. That's just an opinion. Sure. That's as good as anyone else, right?
So to address your question as well, I get to handle it from both extremes. My paid job, 5,000 user company, multiple sites. We looked at just recently trying to go to Exchange in the cloud using BPOS, potentially getting it off premises. I want it out of my data center. It's a commodity item. The other commodity item that I feel that we're trying to get it into the cloud is SharePoint. We're trying to figure out how to architect it. Well, I'm specifically trying to figure out how to architect it to service my company. But again, those commodity items, I want to get them out of my data center. I don't want to be servicing from an electrical, cooling, maintenance to the hardware, operating system, applications. Let somebody else do that. Even for an organization that's got a sizable IT organization, but for 5,000 people, we don't have that. To the other extreme, actually implemented because I was not going to put an Exchange server in my church where my wife's the administrator of that church for 8 people to go to that cost because one, I'm the guy that's going to get the call when it doesn't work. So I didn't want to do that. So I used a different solution because one, it was free. I won't talk about it, but it was free to an 801c3 for 8 users. So it totally made sense. Used Outlook as the front end because that's what everybody used. And they used BlackBerries or what different types of smart devices. But again, stuck that up in the cloud because, again, it made sense from a cost standpoint for them. Same way with us. Now, we didn't do, at my paid job, as I'll put it, we didn't do the BPOS solution just because as an organization, we've still got an old school mentality of want to be able to touch it. But I will tell you, shortly after we go to Exchange 10 here, I would say probably by 13, my email and my SharePoint will be in the cloud.
So I come from local government, so we have a little different perspective on this. We are driven to the cloud by what is said to be cost savings, significant cost savings. Local governments are struggling financially, so we're looking for cost savings. And so my job is to look for ways in the county to save money. And then when we look to the cloud, we have our CIO selling the cloud as this big opportunity to save cost. And then it comes to me, and I have to do the ROI, and I'm not seeing it, especially when 85% of our budgets are people cost, and you don't want to lay anybody off when you're working for local government.
Right.
You don't want to put people out of work. So where are we seeing these costs? Hardware is not significant enough for me to justify moving to the cloud. Where are the real cost savings outside of people?
You want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo that. So I work for a mid-sized new media company, and it's the same deal. We're pretty mature in infrastructure. We have SharePoint, we have Exchange, we have everything laid out. And to convert to the cloud, we're not seeing cost savings either. And I'm looking for someone that's done the analysis with that return on investment that says, hey, putting this in the cloud, transitioning to the cloud is going to save you money. We don't see it anyway, except for, like you said, people. That's the only area we can see cost savings.
Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, it's a case-by-case basis. Not everything from a cost perspective should be put in the cloud. Putting my consultant hat on, I've consulted for a lot of organizations, mid-level organizations, that whereas they didn't want to take, between not only the hardware costs, but the lead time to bring on your consultants, to bring on your staff, to support the hardware, to support the applications. By the time you have to deal with that, you could easily save some money. You could have a return on investment. and a proper cost benefit analysis to go to the cloud from that perspective. But it really is a case-by-case basis, and not everything, is not beneficial to go in the cloud for that.
I think the question is, what do you say to these, well, and I guess I am an executive, but what do I say to my CIO when I become the anti-cloud? Where do you, I'm the rain cloud, exactly. Because he's already sold it to the board of supervisors, he sold it to the executive office, they say, we gotta move to the cloud, we're gonna save money, and here comes Shireen saying, it's not happening, people. So what do you say to those folks?
I put together a PowerPoint presentation with the, well, see, I can do that because, I have an MBA, so I just put my accountant and my finance hat on, I crunch the numbers, I do a PowerPoint presentation with the high points, and that's what I present to senior management. Yes.
So to take an opposite approach to that, I did the same thing. My cost per user to go, I mean, the justification was there for us to make the move. We didn't make the move because I told you about the old school, I want to be able to touch it. It was a mentality thing. The cost justification for me was there to the tune of about $150 per user per year. Significant when you're talking 5,000 users. I mean, that's $250,000 I could have used to do something else with, or save jobs or whatever. We weren't looking to lay people off, but I said it was about $150 per year to go to savings to go to the BPOS solution versus just for Exchange. That didn't include the SharePoint at that time, but versus getting it out. Now again, that included removal of the hardware, which was going to have to be refreshed. I know that's not significant, but I was looking at I was at a 6-figure investment there. Savings on the SAN, savings of the electricity, savings of the AC. I mean, it was a deep dive ROI on it that was done versus paying about $60 a year per user to go to Exchange in the cloud through Microsoft. Plus, my disaster recovery was already done. I didn't have to, though it's a commodity application, I didn't have it. My disaster recovery site floated down the river last year when Nashville flooded, and I had to move it, so now I've got to do a new disaster recovery site, and so my disaster recovery was already covered by doing it. Again, we didn't do it because of old school mentality.
I think it's easy to make the case for Exchange, and I actually did the deep dive and made the case for Exchange. One of the issues there was only about a $250,000 difference between going to the cloud and consolidating services internally, because right now we're in a distributed type of environment, so we've got a lot of duplicative costs. So it was about $250,000 a year difference. That still has, I work in government, so it's very political. So politically, they're like, what's $250? We can keep it in-house. But we did make the case to go out. My struggle is all the other applications and all of the other things that we're trying to move out. I think Exchange is an easier sell. I have about 14,000 users. It was easy. It's a commodity service. We can do that. But now we have our PeopleSoft application, our HRMS application, our the SharePoints, and now we're talking about Office 365, and it's just a mess.
And what are the costs to get there? So after you do these PowerPoint presentations, I'm doing the same, and you make that presentation, and how much is it going to cost you to actually get there, and then to get rid of that hardware? So I'm freeing up data center space. I'm now probably getting rid of a hardware jockey. What is his salary a year? But is it going to cost me $500,000 to get there? When am I going to get a return on that expense, right? And then who knows, is this just a dream in the cloud? Is it all going to come back? I mean, we cycle about every 20 years, 15 years, Are we wasting our time?
System, because you work for, so I can relate to you, and I don't even know if they're ready. I'm not saying they will not, but maybe, they're not ready, so maybe you also need to involve, my suggestion will be to involve some of your technical, people. Maybe they'll need to do the research and see, is project server ready for the cloud? So that would help your case, a little bit. But the fact that the cloud is ready doesn't mean that, for us, because we work for government, we can leverage that. We just don't know that, so that will buy you some time.
I can give an example about what I was talking about before. We have a colo where we have all our physical servers. If I virtualize P2V them all and move it, I'll cut our hosting cost in half, absolutely in half, just by making that move. And as soon as I sell that to my COO, he's going to say, let's go and move. The only thing really holding us back now from actually doing it is we got a contract, so we got to wait for the contract to finish. So there's one saving right there for what we're doing, not for like Exchange. But just to give you an example, basically everything in our company is in the cloud. We didn't even know that was 4 years ago, whatever, before that, because we outsourced Exchange, we outsourced SharePoint, even our ERP systems through another company, so we even have that outsourced. And if we didn't do that, because there's only 2 of us that work IT for the whole, we wouldn't even have an ERP system. We just wouldn't have been able to implement it ourselves and maintain it. So, but the one thing it does do is and it would hurt, but you're going to have to, it does save on people. We can manage a lot more things because we put all this stuff outside of our company.
So how can you, I don't know how I can say this. We're going to have, if we did it, we'd have to have a public and a private because of that. Where are you getting the return on the investment with this? I mean, because you're still going to have the hardware. If you're doing the private versus the public, you're still going to have the manpower. I mean, if you're having to do the dual, where is this cost savings coming from?
We stepped in late, sorry. I'm just having a hard time keeping up with everybody because everybody's talking about the cloud, but I'm not hearing any demarcation between, is it infrastructure as service, is it platform, is it software? I think all these plays into that, basically how you have to do your cost-benefit analysis, and it'll affect it greatly. Also, the other part is, are you an ISV, right? Are you a line of business application, or is it just internally for manufacturing? That's also going to play a big part as well, because in that case, scaling is a huge issue for you. So that's why I'm asking actually everybody that's making the comments, where are you falling in the spectrum of cloud computing in those questions?
So I mean, I know we spent a lot of time on cost. Question I kind of have, a lot of the presentations I've been to today is centered around like empowering users to spin up their own instances in the cloud. I mean, am I the only person that sees that as problematic? I mean, I have to pay for the infrastructure or the hosting one way or the other, so if I just let them spin up. I mean, I was in a meeting the other day, and the vice president was like, all of our developers can have a private copy of the sandbox, they can each have 5 or 10 servers. And I was like, I don't know how we'll do that. So I don't know. Is that something that you guys see? Are there controls around that you guys use to?
I can say from my experience that we internally, as we went to the cloud, started using Windows Azure, SQL Azure, we've definitely seen that now you actually need to track what your developers are doing, right? Because before that, well, developers got their virtual servers. That's the cost that you've paid. You've given them the hardware, and now whatever is the way that they're using it, it's up to them, right? But then, like, we found that a lot of our developers, because we have a lot of database management tools, and we've adapted them to work with SQL Azure, what happened was that developers and testers spun up a lot of SQL Azure instances, right? And a lot of those were just empty and not in use at all, right? But it still costs you something. So same thing with the compute power. Again, your developers and testers, they would start using them, and then they might leave them running on the weekend, or they might be not using them at all, right? So we had to internally develop tools to monitor that and track the cost and track the usage. And we just had to, we being a software company, for us it was easier, right? We could develop the tools, and but yeah, that's definitely a pain.
So to start with your question, I absolutely see it as a problem. As an overall strategist in the IT industry for a couple of different companies over the last 10 years, yes, definitely. I do see some benefit in a test development type environment. Definitely not going to put that in the hands for production. Where I'm currently at, I would never put that in any of the users' hands. They're mostly non-technical. We're very much a COTS shop. We don't do a lot of development in-house. We outsource that and say, bring us an app. So we wouldn't do that. I would see that a benefit for us to be able to provision much faster for us, though. To go to the gentleman in the back's question, I think they're all cloud. So SaaS, IaaS, platform, whatever you want to do. Right now, we're doing specifically just SaaS stuff. We're looking in this next year into infrastructure as a service, and how can we now start to use Azure and potentially some other providers that we have for vendors to be able to use different platforms from an Azure standpoint, infrastructure from one of our other major players, whether it be Amazon or whether it be an AT&T, to try and get, again, to do that. We're actually facing a major data center rebuild if we don't do something. And we can't stay in the current data center we're in, and we don't want to move our headquarters, so that's kind of where we're at.
I can give a real-life example to that. Basically, we have stage and development because we develop our own software. Well, the development environment is all virtualized, so is stage, and development's broken now. So instead of fixing development environment, they want us to make another stage, rebuild all the, copy all the virtual machines. So that's exactly your point. It makes it too easy for them, I think. Oh, we're not going to do it.
So the costs go up, and in the long run, we all stop looking at it and watching it, and we see all these machines fired up and just sitting there, taking up resources, and in a year or two, it's going to cost you more than it did originally. It's like a new broom. It's it sweeps clean. After a while, it gets crazy.
I think you have to manage that. We implemented VMware initially and didn't have a lot of management over it, and we wound up seeing a lot of servers that we didn't know what they were, if they was being used for, who owned it, why it was built. And when we did all of the Microsoft audit, we got killed on it. But this time, we implemented a VMware infrastructure who put policies down. He's not well liked, but at least now, people have to give a reason for why they want this particular VM installed and what to do with it. And it's regularly checked for utilization. So management helps that out.
Yeah, I would echo that. Definitely in our case, we wanted to keep the flexibility, and we wanted to empower people to actually get that job done. And we just implemented the controls and checks and balances, but still wanted to give them a certain kind of amount of freedom.
One of the things I think that we need to do is educate our management, because they've heard one side of the cloud, the hype from the vendors that they're going to save all this money. But anytime we deal and put out a contract, we've got overhead too. We've got to monitor that contract. We've got to make sure that we're getting what we pay for. We may be losing work years in one area. We may be gaining them in another whole area. So what you're saying is you're not seeing the savings. You may actually be increasing your costs if you're going to the cloud, because you have to make sure that your SLAs are being adhered to. Your auditing may be different because you've got auditing concerns. So all those things have to be looked after, and you've got to have a crackerjack management team to just manage that contract.
Two things. I agree with you wholeheartedly. A lot of what we have to do is we have to actively manage our management. I mean, as a project manager, that's just a part of my daily responsibilities. I manage my boss, make sure he has what he needs, make sure senior management understands both sides of the conversations. I mean, when I get back, it'll be an active course of, we're not going to buy everything that we saw out here. We can't. I mean, it's just an active daily part of it. And to my man's point, a lot of I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But a lot of that is when you consider cloud or any type of offering is, what is the governance model going to be to how, what people can and can't do. And that's one thing that people, either it's too much or too little or not necessarily thought through enough. And in my environment, we go through that daily, because we have We have some managers that don't like governance at all. You know, you have some employees that have been working 20, 30 years, and they're like, I don't want any new processes. I don't want any new, you know, big brother telling me what I can and can't do. But at the same token, you know, it's just a necessary fact of life.
Yes, so I think the reality is that not enough time has passed for us to really analyze whether the cloud is beneficial from a cost perspective or what have you. And I think we're in this era where vendors are trying to push it down because, of course, the vendors want you to put your data in the cloud. It benefits them. Their staffing goes up, et cetera. So I think that, you know, over the years we'll get a better view of whether this is beneficial to our organizations or not. And so to the gentleman's point that was in the back, you just take it on a case-by-case basis and see if it saves money for you or not, if it's beneficial or not. And, you know, outside of that, you kind of analyze it as we go. And that's what I've gotten so far out of being here.
Okay, I got just another thought on that. It sounds like one of the things we haven't really considered is the cost of contract, the auditing. You know, that sounds really interesting. Going back to your point over there, you know, you had a standard process, or you bought a product. You spent $1 million customizing it, right? So I mean, that's again, it sounds like some of the ROI questions we're going to have to deal with is a longer list, right? We're not owning stuff, we're managing it, right? We're paying for management. So it sounds like this. Some of the things I'm hearing here. It actually comes back to, if it's simple, if it's commodity, it's probably a candidate. And once it gets farther away from that, it probably becomes more of a question. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. I think there's any easy exceptions. I mean, we've got email right now. We've got SharePoint. What do you think is the next one? What's the next easy target? What's the next on the list? Database. I think Azure. Is that? I'll pass you over. What's your thoughts on that? I'm sorry, what's that?
Our organization uses both SQL Server cubes and a large Oracle database.
So from our
SaaS works a lot over Oracle databases and DB2, because I've done both with SaaS. So, but now.
Yeah, you did now.
Now.
Well, for our perspective, I mean, I think a lot of the idea behind the cloud is like increased utilization of your hardware, whether it be private or public. Our database instances consume multiple nodes already. You know, we have some 8 wide, fully utilized, and we spike. I mean, we're 100% for, you know, maybe 30 minutes at a time. So there's just no benefit at all for us to, you know, go out and utilize somebody else's hardware. We've got a lot more control and granularity over what we've got today, I think.
Just, I guess, a follow-up. UC is probably the next thing that's going to be big in the cloud, specifically with Link and Microsoft's acquisition of Skype. And, you know, I think that's going to be probably the next big thing. On another note, I'm not sure if anyone has dealt with the whole hybrid concept with on-prem versus, or on-prem plus cloud. And it looks to me, a lot of companies will, or you know, this is looking attractive to them. I don't know why, because it seems extremely complicated with adding federation services and single sign-on and having, you know, one Exchange box on-prem and another in the cloud, and what happens when you have to manage that or if it breaks. And how does that help a company who has sort of outsourced half of their services to the cloud?
Just to your point, I would say that hybrid doesn't necessarily mean everything is integrated, managed through one single pane of glass. From our perspective, you know, we use a CDN. We push content out to our content distribution network. It's not managed in the same way, and we don't have a trust relationship or anything. We also do some bulk processing. It doesn't have the same, it's not integrated with Active Directory or anything at all, but it's just a way of offloading some extra capacity. So we don't have to manage a cohesive cloud that's a hybrid model. It's hybrid technically, but it's not necessarily integrated or managed the same.
Right, so talking specifically for Microsoft-related products like Exchange that require integration with AD, and to be able to have, obviously, you're building, you have two separate environments, and you require ADFS, and that brings in a whole, load of technologies with its certificates and how that gets managed with single sign-on and all that stuff. It seems to be, that model alone seems extremely complicated. I mean, it's good for us. We're service providers who go in there and design it and build it, but then, what happens after that type thing.
Yeah, I do agree that sometimes people, for some reason, think that hybrid is kind of a safer way to try things, and they don't realize that hybrid might be way more expensive than either of the options when they have to coexist and integrate.
See, for our organization, it's ramp-up time. So I've got a scenario where I've got a Lotus Notes implementation that we're bringing on to our Exchange environment, and I've got a short amount of time to do it. In that case, hybrid would help because I can immediately get notes in the cloud, and then if I want to bring it on premise, I can do it. So that's the only scenario where I see it working.
Right, so it's not really your choice. You have to get rid of the old environment anyway. It's an old notes in your case, notes installation. Sometimes people get stuck with some kind of Exchange 2000 and they need to get rid of that. So that might accelerate that transition.
I was just wondering who's using multiple cloud vendors? A bit of Google, a bit of Amazon, a bit of Microsoft. Has anybody gone hybrid in that sense?
I know of one organization that's doing it. The College Board does a lot of that. Yeah, they do a lot of that because they have a lot of sub-sites dealing with a lot of SAT-related services, and so they have. I definitely know they use Amazon, Epsilon, and a few others.
And I know that a lot of this has been focused around computing, cloud computing, and I keep going back to the CDN example, which I consider cloud personally. So we do utilize multiple vendors. That means more edge locations. I can push more content closer to more customers globally. Some are cheaper in certain regions, so we balance it that way, but we only look at it from a content distribution perspective. So.
Okay. So I think we are running out of time. So any closing thoughts? Yeah, thanks. Thank you all for coming. We have a few giveaways.
Got a few little giveaways for the biggest question askers or biggest contributors here. Here we go. I think you might have been one of those. I'll make an executive decision here, and there you go. You can have one of those. Let's have a look. Let's see. There we go. Okay. And okay. Oh, may I? You choose the next one, Dmitry.
Okay.
That was precious glass in that one, so you. I got. How about this guy over here? How's a cloud bag there for you?
Thank you all for coming. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Have a good afternoon.